My wife cheated with our neighbor, then secretly transferred $250, $0 of our savings into her sister's account before filing for divorce. Now she's claiming I'm the one stealing when I found the papers she hid. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. Honestly, it feels like I'm living in some twisted soap opera, but the truth is, it's all real. So here, how it started. My wife, Amanda, and I had been together for nearly 10 years. We married young, built a decent life, had 2 kids, and I thought we were solid. But over the last few months, I noticed little things. Her phone always seemed to be glued to her hand. She was more secretive about her texts and social media, and she'd suddenly get defensive if I asked about her whereabouts. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just stressed at work, or maybe I was overthinking it. But then, I started noticing the subtle changes in her behavior. She'd come home late more often, claiming she was working late, but I'd find her car parked at the neighbor's house well past midnight, and the way she'd whisper on the phone, sometimes. I'd catch her giving a fake laugh or hurriedly shutting her phone when I walked into the room. It was obvious she was hiding something. One day, I decided to take a closer look at her phone when she was in the shower. I didn't plan to snoop, but I was curious. That's when I saw the messages. They weren't explicit at first, just flirty, suggestive texts with Mark, our neighbor. But then I saw a recent message that made my stomach drop. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed you." I froze. My mind raced. How long has this been going on? Was I just imagining things? I felt this strange mixture of anger, betrayal, and confusion. It was like my entire world was crashing down. The next step was obvious. I needed to confront her, but I wanted to be sure. So I started digging more. I found out she'd been secretly transferring money from our joint account. Over the past few months, she'd moved around $250, $0 into her sister's account. I couldn't believe it. Why would she do that? I thought we were doing okay financially, but apparently she'd been hiding her true intentions. I also uncovered some papers she'd hidden, bank statements, receipts, and some kind of contract with her sister. It all pointed to her planning something big, something I wasn't privy to. When I finally confronted Amanda about the affair, her reaction was infuriating. She denied everything at first, then started spinning some ridiculous story about how I was imagining things, how Mark was just a friend, and how I was paranoid. She called me crazy for even suspecting her and accused me of being insecure, but I wasn't stupid. I had evidence. I showed her the texts, the bank statements, the papers I found. Her face went pale for a second, then she quickly switched gears, yelling that I was just jealous and controlling, that I didn't trust her, but I knew the truth. The emotional impact hit me like a freight train. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I was furious. How could she do this? How could she betray everything we built? But underneath that anger was a deep sadness. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. I kept asking myself what I did wrong, how I missed all the signs. It was a roller coaster of emotions, shock, rage, heartbreak, and finally, a numb acceptance that this was the end of our marriage. I knew I couldn't trust her anymore, and I didn't see a way to fix this. Now I'm faced with a decision. Do I try to work through this mess? Do I fight for my family, or do I cut my losses and walk away? The betrayal runs so deep, and I feel like I've been played for a fool. But I also feel a strange sense of clarity. This isn't just about cheating or money. It's about respect, honesty, and whether I can ever trust her again. Honestly, I don't know what's next. I just know I'm hurt, angry, and trying to figure out how to move forward from here. After I found out everything, her affair, the money transfers, the hidden papers, I felt like I was walking around in a fog. My mind kept replaying the moments I missed, the signs I ignored, and the times I brushed off her strange behavior. It was like I was living in some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I couldn't believe Amanda, the woman I trusted more than anyone, had been lying to me for months. And the fact that she'd secretly transferred $250,000 into her sister's account just pushed me over the edge. I remember sitting on the couch that night, staring at the pile of papers I'd found. I felt numb but also furious. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this, cheat on me with Mark, and then steal from us? It was like she was planning her escape all along. I knew I needed to confront her again, but this time I had a plan. I couldn't just accuse her without evidence. I had to be smart about it. The next day, I decided to dig deeper into the bank statements. I wanted to understand exactly where the money went and why. I found out that the $250, $0 was transferred in chunks over several months. I also discovered that she had opened a new account under her sister's name, Lisa, without my knowledge. The transfer was made from our joint savings account, which I thought was secure. I couldn't wrap my head around how she managed to pull this off without me noticing sooner. I'd been so busy with work, with the kids, with everyday life, I missed the signs. Now it felt like I'd been blindsided. I also found the documents she'd hidden, an agreement of some sort, a family trust or settlement that I couldn't quite understand at first. It was written in legal jargon, but what stood out was that she was planning to cut me out of our assets entirely. She'd even gone as far as changing the beneficiaries on some of our accounts to her sister. I felt a deep, sinking betrayal. This wasn't just about the affair, it was about her trying to wipe me out financially. I felt like I'd been robbed not just of money but of trust, of my marriage, of my entire life. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started by calling my lawyer, explaining everything. We discussed how to freeze her accounts, how to get access to the money she'd transferred, and what legal steps I could take to protect what was left. But I also wanted to confront her directly. I needed her to see that I wasn't some naive fool anymore. I wanted her to understand that I knew everything. That evening, I sat her down in the living room. Her face was tight, defensive. I laid out everything I'd uncovered, the texts, the bank statements, the documents. Her eyes widened for a second, then she started lying again, saying I was crazy, that I was imagining things, that I was paranoid. She insisted she was just trying to protect the family, that the money was for a fresh start, and that Mark was just a fling, nothing serious. She told me I was overreacting, that I was insecure, that I didn't trust her, but I had all the proof. I told her I wasn't buying her lies anymore. Her reaction was classic. She got angry, yelled at me, called me controlling and jealous, and accused me of trying to ruin her. She even claimed I was the one secretly stealing money all along, trying to frame her. It was so typical. She was spinning every story she could think of, trying to make herself the victim. But I could see through her act. I wasn't going to let her gaslight me this time. I told her I was done, that I wanted a divorce, and that she was going to have to answer for her actions. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything, her lies, her betrayal, the money she'd stolen, and how she'd planned all this behind my back. I felt humiliated, angry, and heartbroken all at once. I'd trusted her for so long, and she'd thrown it all away. I wondered how I could have missed the signs, how I'd been so blind. But more than anything, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This was the end of our marriage. I knew I had to get out before she drained us completely or did even more damage. The next day, I reached out to a lawyer to start the divorce process. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her moves, just in case she tried to hide or move more money. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I was done being a fool. I still felt the sting of betrayal, but I was determined to take control of my life again. I realized that sometimes, the only way to truly fight back is to be smart, stay calm, and make sure you're protected. Because when someone you trusted turns out to be your worst enemy, you have to be ready to fight for what's yours. The days that followed were a blur of legal meetings, phone calls, and trying to keep my head above water. Every time I thought about Amanda's lies, her affair, and the money she'd stolen, I felt a mix of rage and helplessness. I had never been a confrontational person, but now I was learning how to be assertive and strategic. I knew I had to play it smart if I wanted to get justice and protect what was left of my life. I spent hours poring over the documents I'd found, trying to piece together her entire scheme. It was clear she'd been planning this for months. She'd opened new accounts, transferred the money in chunks to avoid detection, and even gone as far as changing the beneficiaries on our joint assets. She convinced her sister Lisa to help her, probably promising her a cut or some kind of future payoff. It was sickening to realize how deep her betrayal went. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so naive. Meanwhile, Amanda kept up her act. She'd throw tantrums, accuse me of being paranoid, and even tried to guilt-trip me into saving our marriage. She claimed she loved me, that she was just trying to do what was best for the family, and that Mark was nothing serious. I couldn't believe her lies anymore. She was a master manipulator. The more she denied, the more I saw her desperation. She knew she was cornered and she was trying to spin her way out of it. I also learned that she had hired a lawyer, probably to prepare for the divorce. I found out through some discreet sources that she'd been meeting with someone, probably a divorce attorney, and that she'd been trying to hide even more money. That's when I decided I needed to step up my game. I contacted my own lawyer, a no-nonsense guy named Tom, who had experience in financial crimes and infidelity cases. We discussed how to freeze her accounts, seize assets, and start the legal process. I also told him about the documents I'd found and the evidence I had. One thing that really stuck with me was how Amanda kept trying to paint herself as the victim. She'd cry, say she was under so much stress, and accuse me of trying to ruin her life. I could see right through her act. She was trying to manipulate the situation, spin her lies, and get away with everything. But I wasn't falling for it anymore. I knew I had solid proof, and I was determined to hold her accountable. That night, I sat her down for what I knew would be the final confrontation. I told her I knew about everything: the affair, the money, her plans to leave me with nothing. I showed her the bank statements and the documents I'd uncovered. Her face twisted in a mix of anger and panic. She denied everything at first, then started with the usual excuses. I was stressed. Mark means nothing. You don't understand. I cut her off. I told her I was done listening to her lies. I told her I was filing for divorce and that she'd have to answer for her actions. Her reaction was classic. She accused me of being jealous, insecure, and controlling. She even tried to turn it around, claiming I was the one secretly stealing money, just to make herself look innocent. I couldn't believe her audacity. I told her I had enough evidence to bury her and that I wasn't going to let her ruin me. I told her she was going to face the consequences of her actions, one way or another. The aftermath was a mess. Amanda started to lash out, throwing things, screaming at me, and accusing me of trying to destroy her. But I stayed calm. I knew I needed to keep my head clear for what was coming next. I had already contacted my lawyer, and we were moving quickly to freeze her assets. I also hired a private investigator to track her movements, just in case she tried to hide or transfer more money. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but also strangely relieved. For the first time in months, I felt like I was taking control of the situation. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. I realized that I'd been so caught up in trying to keep the family together that I missed the signs of her deception. Now, it was about standing up for myself, protecting my children, my assets, and my dignity. I knew she'd try to spin her lies and manipulate the situation, but I had the truth on my side. And that's what finally gave me the strength to move forward. The legal process moved faster than I expected, which was both a relief and a new source of stress. My lawyer, Tom, managed to get a temporary freeze on Amanda's accounts, and we filed for divorce on the grounds of infidelity and financial misconduct. I knew she'd fight me tooth and nail. She always was good at twisting things around, but I had enough evidence to back up everything. Still, watching her lawyer up and prepare her own counterattack made me realize how much of a battle this was about to become. Meanwhile, Amanda's behavior became even more erratic. She started accusing me of stealing money, claiming I was the one secretly draining our savings, trying to ruin her reputation. She spun stories about how I was controlling, jealous, and paranoid, anything to divert attention from her own lies. She yelled at me, called me possessive, and even tried to turn the kids against me, saying I was abusing her during the marriage. It was sickening to see her so desperate to cling to her lies, but I refused to get pulled into her game. One day, she stormed into the house, furious, waving some papers. She claimed I'd stolen new documents from her safe, papers that proved she was innocent, that she was doing everything for the family's future. I knew better. I'd already had a suspicion she was trying to hide even more money or evidence, so I had my lawyer review the documents she presented. Turns out they were forged. She manipulated some legal papers trying to make herself look innocent, but Tom confirmed they were fake. That was the final straw. I realized she was willing to go to any lengths to cover her tracks. I started to piece together her entire scheme more clearly. She'd been planning this for months, maybe even longer. She opened a new account under her sister Lisa's name, transferred the money gradually, and kept me in the dark. She even tried to get her sister involved in some shady dealings, promising her a cut of the stolen money. The worst part was knowing she'd been lying to me every single day, pretending everything was fine. I felt like a fool for trusting her for so long. While all this was happening, I also had to manage my own emotions. I was furious, yeah, but I also felt a deep sadness. I kept thinking about the good times, the vacations, the family dinners, the nights we spent just talking. It was hard to accept that everything I believed in was built on lies. I wasn't just losing a wife. I was losing the person I thought I knew. Still, I knew I had to stay strong for myself and for the kids. They didn't deserve to be caught in this mess. I started setting boundaries. I told Amanda I wouldn't tolerate her lies or her manipulations anymore. I made it clear I was serious about taking everything she'd stolen and making sure she paid for her betrayal. I also told her I was prepared to fight for full custody of the kids if she kept trying to turn them against me or manipulate them. She scoffed, called me heartless, and said I was ruining everything. But I knew I had to be firm. I couldn't let her continue to deceive everyone, especially not the kids. Things got even more intense when Amanda's lawyer sent a counter-complaint accusing me of abusing her during the marriage and claiming I'd been controlling. It was classic deflection, but I was ready. I had all the evidence, texts, bank statements, witness statements, and I knew I could prove her lies. I also hired my own investigator to look into her financial activities and her relationship with Mark. Turns out, she'd been spending a lot of time with him, even secretly meeting up at night. That confirmed everything I suspected about her affair. As I sat down to review all the evidence, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and determination. This wasn't just about the money or the affair anymore. It was about protecting myself from her lies and manipulations. I realized I couldn't fix what she'd broken, but I could make sure she didn't ruin me further. I was ready for the fight, and I was determined to come out on top. No matter how much she tried to spin her stories, I knew the truth was on my side. And I was finally starting to feel like I had some control over this chaos. The court dates came faster than I expected, and every hearing felt like stepping into some gladiator arena. Amanda showed up with her lawyer, trying to spin her version of events, crying, accusing, twisting everything around to make herself look like the victim. She kept claiming I was emotionally abusive, that I had been controlling and jealous, even though I had all the receipts to prove otherwise. I could see right through her lies, but it was exhausting having to sit there and listen to her distort the truth. What really pushed me over the edge was when she brought up the money transfer. She claimed I had been secretly siphoning funds, trying to frame her. I knew I had to be strategic, so I brought the bank statements, the transfer records, the legal documents showing her scheme. When I presented all of that, her face went pale. The judge looked over everything, and it was clear she was caught in her lies. The evidence was irrefutable. Meanwhile, Amanda's accusations about me being abusive or controlling fell flat. I stayed calm, answered the questions directly, and let the evidence speak for itself. I knew I had to keep my composure, not just for the court but for my own mental health. Every time she tried to manipulate the judge or make herself sound innocent, I felt a surge of anger. How dare she try to turn things around after everything she'd done? I had proof, clear, undeniable proof, and I made sure to emphasize that. The judge finally ruled in my favor on the financial issues. The accounts she'd transferred money from were ordered to be frozen, and the assets were to be split according to the law. I felt a small sense of relief, knowing I was finally getting some justice, but the emotional toll was heavy. Amanda's lawyer immediately filed an appeal, of course, trying to drag things out, but I was prepared. I had a team of experts working on gathering more evidence, making sure she couldn't wiggle out of her responsibilities. Throughout all this, I also focused on the custody battle. The judge was surprisingly firm. She saw through Amanda's manipulations and was concerned about her unstable behavior. I submitted witness statements from friends and family, testifying about her recent actions and her dishonesty. I also had recordings of her threatening me during arguments, which I hadn't wanted to use at first but realized I needed to protect myself and the kids. I wasn't about to let her turn the court against me because of her lies. The most shocking moment came when Amanda, during one of the court sessions, tried to accuse me of trying to ruin her reputation to cover up her own guilt. I looked at her and thought, "You're really going to play the victim now?" It was so transparent. I knew she was desperate, and I also knew I had to stay focused. I told the judge about her financial schemes, her affair, her attempts to manipulate the kids, and her lies. I was honest, straightforward, and I refused to be intimidated. In the end, the court awarded me primary custody of the kids, with Amanda getting supervised visitation. The judge made it clear that her recent behavior was a concern, and that she'd have to demonstrate stability before gaining more access. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I wanted the best for my children, but I also hated to see their mother like this, so manipulative and selfish. I promised myself I'd do everything I could to protect them from her influence. Looking back, I realize this whole mess has changed me. I've become more cautious, more aware of the people I trust, and more determined to safeguard what's mine. I learned that sometimes you have to fight tooth and nail for justice, even if it means exposing your deepest wounds. I also learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who really matters, those who stand by you when things fall apart. I'm still healing, still rebuilding, but I know one thing for sure. I won't let her destroy everything I care about. I'm stronger than I thought, and I'll keep fighting for my future no matter what. After the court sessions and the dust finally settled, I thought I'd feel some relief, but honestly, it's been a long, exhausting road. Amanda's lies, her manipulations, and her betrayal left scars I don't think will ever fully heal. Still, I've managed to piece my life back together, at least to some extent. The divorce is finalized now, and I have primary custody of the kids. I see Amanda occasionally, but her presence is just a reminder of how much trust can be broken in a single moment. Looking back, I realize I underestimated how deep her deception went. The money she transferred, the affair with Mark, the way she tried to wipe me out financially, all of it was her way of escaping her own failures and dissatisfaction. I won't pretend I wasn't naive. I thought we had a solid marriage, that our love was real, but her actions proved otherwise. I learned that sometimes people hide who they truly are behind a facade, and you only see their true colors when it's too late. This experience has changed me. I'm more cautious now, more wary of the subtle signs of deception, more aware of the importance of transparency in a relationship. I've also become more protective of my boundaries and my assets. The betrayal taught me that trust isn't something to take for granted. It's fragile and must be earned every day. I've also become more resilient. I never thought I'd have to fight so hard for my dignity and my children's future, but I did, and I came out stronger. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I'd say this: don't ignore the little warning signs. Trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to dig a little deeper if something feels off. Protect your assets, your mental health, and your peace of mind. Most importantly, remember that you deserve honesty and respect. If someone betrays those basic principles, it's better to face the truth early than to let it destroy everything. I've learned that revenge isn't about getting even. It's about reclaiming your life and dignity. I didn't do anything wrong. Her betrayal was her choice, and I refused to carry that guilt. I focused on my kids, my work, and rebuilding myself. It's not easy, and some days are still a struggle, but I know I'm better off without her. I've accepted that sometimes love isn't enough, and that true loyalty is rare. But I also know that I'm capable of surviving and even thriving after the storm. Now I'm looking forward. I'm focused on my future, on healing, and on creating a life where trust and honesty matter. I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. I've learned my lesson, and I'll carry that with me, stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever life throws next. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is that I'm still standing, still fighting for what's right, and still holding on to hope that better days are ahead.